a soundtrack by itself be a driving force for the game's success and timelessness?
Music brings over 50% of the experience. The challenge comes from doing what the game is asking for, not necessarily trying to write for writing's sake. I'm thinking like a player.
Multi-award-winning composer Chase Bethea.
You kind of had this video game style really early on. Would you say that you found your style back then?
I had the sound very, very early. That's because I had been playing games since I was 6 years old. Ocarina of Time and Resident Evil. And so I really knew the sound.
What was it like to work on this latest album of yours?
I realized the player's going to be down there for hours and I couldn't put this whole thing on loop. There's always progression. Dynamic things that are happening within the game, from combat to being exploratory to the environment. If you and I play the game at the same time, you're going to have a different music section than I am.
You did mention that a lot of good music comes from a dark place.
You're the most vulnerable that you can be emotionally at that level. It is a very weird energy to experience. It comes with a price. The price I'm speaking about is
Chase, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. I am always very interested to, talk to the creative individuals that support and work in the video game industry, especially when it comes to music. I think it's such an important factor, within the industry. And I think as a person that has, dedicated his life to music and his career towards music and games specifically, I think, the first order of business is to ask you, how did music get into your life? How were you introduced to music in the first place?
Before I begin, I want to say, Gotcha, thank you so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure.
I'm excited to talk with you and all those things.
Thank you.
So music in my life, mostly the thing began with my parents. And so I think my mom would sing to me while I was in the womb. And then I was able to kind of learn songs. My dad tells a great story about, I learned a 7-minute song by Quincy Jones called The Secret Garden.
Wow.
And I was only 2 or 3 years old. And he said I was singing it like I wrote the song.
It's incredible.
And he looked in the back and he thought, oh, your mom must have taught you that song, because I knew all the words. And if you're not familiar with the song, it's 5 different artists on that song. So different inflections, different lyrics, different tonalities.
My goodness.
And then I asked my mom, because he told me the story, I think within the past year. And I asked my mom, I was like, did you teach me this song? She's like, no, I must have just had it on and you learned it yourself.
Wow. That's crazy.
So it started then. And then I was mostly just figuring things out. I had like a little keyboard and Ramaka toys and things. And then it moved into having an alto saxophone, and then my parents got me. And then I was in choir. But while I had that saxophone, I was also transcribing music that I didn't know I was knowing how to transcribe. I just would hear things I got tired of playing Hot Cross Buns and A Wild Rose and all my other repertoire that I had to play on alto sax, and I got bored, and so I would just turn on the smooth jazz station in Chicago, and then I just transcribe the notes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't have manuscript paper. I didn't even know what that was typically, so I kind of made my own on like normal paper and
Wow.
tried to write that. But then I just did like the letters, and I'm still in 5th and 6th grade at this time. And then Game Boy Camera came around, and I discovered that you could write music on the Game Boy Camera. So I guess that's my first introduction to game music, and my first video game music that existed in the world. And then it moved into my later years of just going to uni, community college and uni, and then taking classical lessons with Mona DeCesar and being a conductor's assistant with Professor Song, getting familiar with the orchestra, going through my classical repertoire, and then moving into jazz at uni and getting up to the highest level of musicianship that you can take in uni. And then, but I was already working in the industry by the time I was nominated by the time I transferred to uni. So I had
Wow.
decided at my fourth theory class in community college that I was not going to wait to figure out how to get into games. And I just bought a book, and the story usually goes about a book, and I read half of the book. It's a complete guide to Aaron Marks by complete guide on the game audio by Aaron Marks, second edition, and then posted my work online, got my first paid and shipped game called Electron Flux on mobile. And then by the time I transferred to uni, I was already nominated for the Score I Can't Escape Darkness next to
That's
a
incredible.
lot of thank you, a lot of other composers in the field, in the entire industry, from Japan to Europe to the States.
Wow.
I was in that pool.
That is incredible. That's such an interesting origin story. And what's, fascinating about it is that was literally your path from day one, and you stuck to it. Music, and you didn't deviate. That's just so wonderful that you found, your calling. I think that's so rare. And, when it happens, it's really fulfilling, I think, because you're doing kind of what you're meant to do. And obviously you're doing it so, so well. I got to ask you though, I've heard the story that you read, half the book. My question would be, why did you read half the book and not the whole book?
Thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. So a little bit more of the etymology is that in 2001 or so, I had got Fruity Loops 3, and I was working on that. And the first thing I had written was on the computer. I showed this girl named Tasha at the bus stop. We went to school, and first thing she said to me was, "It sounds like it should be in a video game." And my background I was trying to do was like hip hop and R&B, and I didn't think I found it insulting at the time. And so I was thinking like, oh, what? I was like, oh, okay. And I think, okay, well, I got to work harder. So by the time I read that book, I could never escape that sound. No matter what I made tracks and tracks and tracks. I've over like probably 300 or 500 tracks from that time until this time.
Wow.
And so by that time I got the book, I knew I had the sound. I had just finished an internship that I could have written music for a different game for. It was a great internship at Mobotori Games with Alex Bortoluzzi, who was an ex-employee of Activision.
Mm-hmm.
He started this mobile game company. And when that studio didn't happen anymore, I mean, I just got there. I wasn't even there that long. I was thinking, I got to figure out how I can keep this momentum to get my music into a game. I was so close. And so I read half of the book, and I got all the information I needed to know who I need to reach out to. And so it was the Game Developer Forum. And once I got the gig, I just posted my work up on the Game Developer Forum site. I heard from 2 people, then didn't hear anything else. And then the third person I heard from, they liked the work. And then I wrote a demo, and I landed the gig, and I shipped the game. I did finish the book.
Okay, good.
5 years later. Because I knew I had to finish the book. I was thinking, you bought that book, you're gonna have it. But if I was to go get the book right now, I went through this book thoroughly. This isn't like clean and pristine. The pages are coming out. I've marked it, I've underlined, I highlighted. I studied that book very, very thoroughly.
Wow, that's so awesome to hear. At least I know that you read the book. Well, it's also great to know that, that book kind of inspired you to take the leap. And you took the leap, and it was the correct leap to do. You mentioned that you kind of had this video game style really early on. Would you say, I mean, it's a bit of a, difficult question probably to answer, but would you say that you found your style back then, or did the style change over the years? Because from what I understand, finding your style as a creative in any sort of format is a bit of a difficult thing, and it takes time, but it kind of seems to me that perhaps you might have found it early. Is that the case, or maybe not?
That is the case. I had the sound very, very early.
Insane.
And that's why, and that's because I had been playing games since I was 6 years old. Most people pick up an instrument at that time.
Yeah.
But I had been listening. I was playing on Game Boy nonstop. I was playing Batman Forever, Turok Battle of the Dinosaurs, Stargate, Home Alone 2, Fist of the North Star, right? Then I moved into Ocarina of Time, and then I was in PlayStation for Resident Evil and Tomb Raider 1996 and Small Soldiers. And then I was on Sega Genesis with Beyond Oasis and Pit Fighter and Earthworm Jim. And so I really knew the sound.
Right.
That was my childhood. I knew all areas of the sound, even when I played Dragonfire on the television. It didn't have a soundtrack, but I knew the sound. And so I guess by the time I was actually making something, someone else could tell you what it sounds like to them because they didn't make it. And that's what I wish I got the first edition of that book, because as I say, I'd be rich. I would be rich. I would have, because like you said, it takes a while for some people to find what their purpose is and to have the sound, like everything aligned for me early. I wasn't listening. But I'm more awake now than I've ever been before. So I'm always listening to when I hear this different things. I'm thinking, okay, I'm hearing this message for a reason. I'm seeing this for a reason. This is coming to me for a reason, and things like that. So I learned. But yes, I had the sound very early.
That is so incredible to know. So incredible to hear. And I don't think there's a method to that. I think it's a consequence of fate, I guess. If you're lucky enough, I would say, to be able to find that style early on. But in any case, whenever a creative finds that style, I think it's a point of a little bit of relief, because you feel easy that this is your direction, and you found it so early, which is absolutely great. You did mention some amazing games. I agree with you that they're absolutely amazing. I also read that you have a whole collection of retro games, right? Like 800, I think, or so. I just want to, just say that, isn't it amazing that not only are you working in the games industry, but you're also an amazing gamer and you're a collector of games. I think it's just all gone full circle for you. That's so incredible, man.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a passion.
Right.
So, and it's a passion that I like to hold on to and continuously. My collection grew through people seeing the passion, and then they donate their games to me, and I study them. And so I'm fortunate for those that they see the focus that I have, and they're able to pass that on to me. And I keep those because they have a story, and they're part of my odyssey. And I had to rebuild my collection from scratch. But when I had decided I was going to be a video game composer, I knew that I had to study games well at a higher level. It wasn't just mostly what I've already played. It was, okay, let's get familiar with other things, because I knew I would come into contact with developers that have a very eclectic and vast taste of backgrounds of games. And I wanted to just be well versed in it all, since I knew I was going down this odyssey. I didn't want to feel like some people that I've been in the field where they're faking it, and they're like and that's their path, and however they get through that. But for me, I know it was genuine, and it's true, because that's what I started from. I'm able to write at the best level because I consider a player first.
That is so, again, such a full circle moment. And I think it works so well for you and for the, games that you compose for. And it shows, obviously, in your work. I've obviously taken a listen at your work and at the games that you've worked with. Really, really great stuff. And I can feel the passion, the gamer passion there. My question would be, from, the plethora of games that you have, and perhaps that you've played as well, and from the composers that you listen to, which are, the composers that you go back to from time to time, and you take a listen, at their music, at their work, to maybe get inspired, or to maybe just kind of doze off, but those few composers that really, stick out to you?
Jesper Kood, Kowatani, Alberto Gonzalez. I'm also thinking, because I usually have a video game music workout playlist.
That's awesome. That's a good one to have.
It is pretty cool. And go for that. Tim Follin is another one. And I'm thinking of the playlist because I know them by games. There's a couple other Japanese composers that I'm thinking about as well. Sometime, Yamatsu Kushida-san as well. And there's a few more, but
awesome.
I would say those are the general ones that I end up returning to, that because it was a memory. It's not necessarily nostalgic because I'm not having that moment, but it's just a memory affiliated with where I was in my life when I heard that music
Exactly.
often.
Yeah.
Not even the first time, but often.
Yeah. I think, I'm actually asking, selfishly for myself as well. I'm definitely going to take a look at the composers. I don't know all of them, and it's really great to learn some new names and definitely find some new music. So thank you for that. And,
You're welcome, yeah.
again, about game music, I spoke about this previously, but I find myself just randomly sometimes just on YouTube searching for the soundtracks, like you said, of games that really send you back to the moment when you were playing it, or of whatever was happening then. And I really often find myself doing that, and 9 times out of 10 it's a song from a video game, or it's a main theme from a video game. It's not a rap song or whatever. It's a song from a video game. Obviously, I'm a big gamer. I've been gaming actually also from 5 or 6 years old, like yourself. Unfortunately, nice. I don't have as big of a game collection as you, but nonetheless.
Not yet, you don't.
Not yet. We'll see if my son will continue the legacy with that. I want to continue to talk a little bit about your skills. Now, I've taken a look at your work, and you have such a wide range of music genres, across many games. There's something happy, something exploratory, then something very scary. And the style is so, so very different, but then it's so you again. My question would be, is that a challenging thing to do, to be so versatile? Or is it just something that comes naturally to you?
It is a challenge based off of the games that I'm writing for. But when I decided to be a video game composer, when I decided to listen to, after so many other different people from that time, when Tasha at the bus stop would say, it sounded like it should be in a video game, to many others that I showed music to, no matter what, said that, I said, okay, then I'm going to be a proper video game composer. I'm going to learn to write in almost any style and every style, because games are an amalgamation of styles as well. And that makes the most sense, because that's also what I grew up listening to. A lot of people typically don't think that the Super Mario theme is reggae, but it is. It has a lot of reggae influence.
Interesting.
If you listen to that and you hear it and someone played it with steel pan
no way.
and all the others, it would sound like that. But the feeling and the arrangement and everything is reggae. It's Caribbean. Wow. And so it's only because of the limitation of the chipset that obviously is that, but it's just how you are reimagining things, and the way that Tim Foley would write it. That was prog rock, him and his brother, Jeff and Tim. That's progressive rock. You can hear that. Wow. You can hear that when Nathan McCree is writing the Tomb Raider soundtrack of 1996. That's a symphonic orchestra. Yeah. Like that feels really good. And you can tell that it is, but you can hear the nuances of where he was trying to at least go with that further. So I'm thinking of all the styles of music that I've heard through, obviously because my ear is strong, and I'm embodying that as best as I can. The challenge comes from doing what the game is asking for, not necessarily trying to write not for writing's sake, seeing like, okay, well, I'm going to just do this because this is that. I'm mostly thinking like a player, and I'm reverse engineering it because I'm trying to see the end point, but I'm also at the beginning because I haven't written anything yet. And then that's when the research comes in great handy of every games that I've played over my life. And I'm thinking, oh, that was that style. Okay, I can have that. And that they did that there. Okay, I can do this. But getting good at certain styles, I'm able to conflate and do genre things that typically don't sound like anything else.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really interesting to know. I'm obviously not a musician, and I'm not well versed in music in general. Is this a unique feature for a composer, or do usually composers, or are usually composers able to be so versatile as yourself?
It's going to be hard to answer that question because it would be as if I'm speaking for all the other composers, but I can only speak for me and think that it's how typical, I would say this, it's typically how most composers are taught when they're in some kind of music school to learn how to write in different styles, only because it's depending on how far they go. So if you're in high school, you're probably not going to be taught that. But once you get into community college or uni level, for sure, you're going to be asked to write, especially if you go into film, then film is going to be all these other things. But because there is no game music program that I know exists properly in a university yet.
Interesting.
So
okay.
when you're learning at film level, you have to write in different styles to fit the scene of the film. It's not always going to be orchestral. And since they've added synth elements ever since Jerry Goldsmith's, kind of pushed that marker there, and then Hans Zimmer came around and pushed the marker there.
Right.
And game developers typically want to copy what's popular in film. It's rare that they want to copy what's popular in most games. It's very rare. And so I learned to just kind of I've always actually done this. I've always written just how I feel it should be written for the art form.
Very interesting.
Hopefully it stands out on its own the way that it sonically should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very interesting to know. You mentioned that there's no game music specific university courses. Do you know why that is the case? Like, would there be a difference between learning to compose for film and learning to compose for games?
Absolutely. There's film as it's been for the past 100 years is a linear form. But then you take someone like me who writes in a dynamic, adaptive, interactive form.
Right.
You don't know what the player's going to do, if they're going to win, if they're going to lose, if they're going to fall down that pit, if they're going to change their items. If you don't know what if, when if.
Right.
So writing in that form, the only thing that linearly they can say they wrote for a game is cutscene, because that's directly what's going to happen in a sequential order. But when things are non-sequential, you adapt and you indict based off of what you may think may happen, and you try to just mostly cover that ground accordingly. So with the institutions, I know that, I'll just tell you straight up, they're just being stubborn with the curriculum ideology. And this is not the first time. When I was at my uni, they were saying it had been years before jazz was implemented into the institution.
Wow.
Jazz music, jazz studies. So that means classical music had been the focus point up until maybe the 70s or the 80s.
Oh, wow.
Maybe that jazz studies is implemented. And then now film is implemented into it, right? Film music. But games has been around since the 60s, late 60s, early 70s for sure. Definitely the 80s.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I remember my director saying to me when I was first being accepted into the program that only 15 students usually get in an annual year.
Wow.
Is that, game music has gone past the bleeps and bloops. And I said, that mindset is exactly why this thing hasn't moved forward. And I was mostly the ambassador in the program that found the game development club and facilitated my colleagues and or my peers in class to learn how to write for games. Remember, by that time I was already nominated in the industry, so
right.
I already had a name.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But I was also trying to be incognito there, because I realized where people were in their lives, and I was thinking, I'm like, oh, I'm way here, so I gotta kind of move a little bit differently, but I'm really trying to just get out of here quickly. But then I end up thinking like, oh, I'm going to help some of them because they really don't know, because it's not everybody thinks to look for the book that I look for. Not everybody, even though most of us have the internet, we're not thinking the same. And that's something that I had to learn. So I end up being, mostly the liaison, the ambassador, and to show if I didn't find that game development club, I don't know if they would have figured out how to kind of write for games while they were actually in the uni.
Wow, that's incredible. It's such an interesting point that you're bringing up. And, the more you talk about it, the more I understand the differences between the two. The fact that it's dynamic is so true. And I've spoken about, dynamic music before, and it's such a very unique feature to games specifically. And you're so right that has to be studied separately. Do you think are there initiatives that are helping this to go forward? Is there any talks perhaps of maybe a course that would concentrate specifically on game development music, or so far it's nothing?
There are courses about game music, and there are definitely videos and YouTubers I can think of many of. The people who push the dynamic music, I believe, are me and several other AAA composers that came before me
Right.
as well. There's other courses that also focus on writing game music properly and understanding middleware.
In
There's
universities,
courses
right?
for
You're
those
talking about
things too. No. These are things outside of the
outside,
university.
right?
So
Okay.
in the university itself, the initiative, I think, would just, here's what I have discovered, I think, is that there are certain professors at specific universities that are trying to build that curriculum to kind of present it to show, hey, this could work,
Right.
but they're so low on the radar. I don't want to say they don't exist. I just want to probably say that they're so low on the radar that it hasn't come to a point where I'm just going to put the school out there. It's not going to be like a Berklee College of Music.
Right.
Whereas, and I know that course would be that would be probably one of the few institutions, but you're not going to be able to study game music at Harvard or at
Right.
Tuskegee Institute
Right.
or the other, whatever, the Columbia College. Columbia College might have a game music course by now, but you get what I'm saying is
Yeah.
it's only a very select few. And so that's what I was thinking of, those other things that happen outside of the institution that people have to become curious about if they want to. You got to kind of make your own curriculum based off of the internet.
Wow, that's surprising if you ask me. I thought that maybe by now there would be a bit more understanding of how important that part of the industry is. Again, practically in each episode, I say that, the video game industry is so big. It's bigger than the music industry and the film industry combined. That's, very, popular kind
That's
of
massive.
fact. And it's just so weird that even when that is the case, we're still stuck with the situation that we're stuck with, where, there's only outside courses that, do this, and there's no specific university that would, undertake the responsibility to teach game music specifically. And it's a weird conundrum, and hopefully it's going to change. What I want to ask you now is, I don't know if this was a podcast that you've been in before, or perhaps I read it in an article. I didn't write it down, but you did mention that a lot of good music comes from a dark place. That really, really stuck with me. And what's funny is that a few moments later, or a day later, I heard on Instagram, I was just doom scrolling, and Gwen Stefani mentioned in an interview that, that's exactly how her music was created, and she can't listen to it now, because if she listens to it now, it makes her want to puke because she remembers all the bad memories or whatever that was going on. And that made me want to ask you this question. If you could elaborate a bit deeper on that as to why that is the case, or is that the case for you as well, perhaps?
I believe it is the case where the good music comes from a dark place. Is you're the most vulnerable that you can be emotionally at that level. And it is a very weird energy to experience. It also, it comes with a price.
Right.
So if you're able to channel the energy that you're feeling and musically make something happen, yes, every piece of music typically will create a memory for some human, because this is how we just interact with that type of sonic form. But if it comes from that energy, it's without a doubt that it's going to take you back to that space and that place, because it's a little, there's a positive energy in music too, don't get me wrong, which is just, I don't want to say like a little more powerful. I think it's just is equally as powerful. And the price I'm speaking about is that if you listen to it for too long, you could find yourself back there.
Oh,
And
wow.
yes, it has happened for me. There's a specific track that I wrote, and I wrote it 2 years ago. And I had to write it for the game Stardander School for Witches, and it was about someone that I cared deeply for and I loved very much, and we were not together.
Right.
And I listened to a reference of music that I heard from a different game, and it was Castlevania Lament of Innocence, I believe. And it's when you're in the open area of the castle. This music is gorgeous. I think maybe Michiru Yamane wrote that one as well. It has this haunting choir that is calm with these chords underneath, but it's not eerie. It's just, there's an imbalance happening.
Right.
It's like, because it's not even unsettling. There's some psychological imbalance. I sat with that piece of music in the dark for over an hour.
Oh my
and
God.
then
Wow.
I wrote what I wrote based off of what I had to write for the game, because the character was someone that is constantly thinking about conspiracies. And for me, I empathize and sympathize the loss of what I had with that person based off of the conspiracies that destroyed us.
Wow. My goodness. Whew, I feel uneasy.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you heard the piece of music, you probably feel, now that I've told you that story, I'll probably be able to take you right there, because every single instrument and nuance and chord and thought process of what it was implemented into that space while I was feeling that
My goodness.
that energy. And I wrote it in a record time. I think I wrote it in less than 2 days.
Wow.
So I think it was like a 2 hour. I think I wrote it in less than 2 days. So it was probably, I wrote it in 2 hours.
My goodness. Well, I'd love to hear that song. I've listened to a lot of your work. Maybe I might have missed it. Maybe I've listened to it, but now that I know the context, I would love to listen to it again. And I would definitely like you to send me the link. But wow, that is, just showcases the power of music. Really, it can teleport you, transport you. It can make you happy. It can make you sad. It can get you inspired. It can make you kind of lose yourself in your head. Find an idea, a eureka moment. It's such a powerful, powerful force. And a part of me is so sad that I'm not musical. A part of me is so sad that I've never picked up a guitar or anything like that. But not everybody, will be a musician or whatnot. But at least we have beautiful music out there that can, that transcends time really, and can, be very deep and very emotionally important for people. Thank you for sharing that. That was actually very interesting to learn.
Thank you for asking.
For sure. Well, since we're talking about the power of music, I would like to divert our attention a little bit again towards games and, talk about how important of a marketing vehicle do you think music is for games specifically? In other words, can a soundtrack by itself, be sort of a driving force for the game's success and for the game's, timelessness?
I strongly believe in that, and I have seen that over the years, and there are many examples that I know other composers have had seen success from, and it depends on the marketing of the game as well as it's done, and the people have to experience that, because music brings over 50% of the experience to that with a proper soundtrack. And I, even with writing a dynamic music style, aligning it to mechanics, add more value to that experience, because that's how cues and other things that make it more memorable are attached to that, because it's part of the art form. It's not just loops. And so if it's a piece that stands on its own, that's even more impactful. But people have to listen. They have to listen.
Yeah.
And listen well. A lot of people, I think, just they listen to music, but I also feel like they skim through it. And that is not how you're going to be able to build that type of emotional response that the art form is presenting to you. But if people did listen with more purpose, they would hear a lot greater game music that's out there and support it at the higher level, versus the ones that are always big love to the ones that have done it already. But there's others that are like almost like not fighting, but it's almost like in a different frequency line. And so if they're not tuned into that right frequency, then you miss it, or people catch it later in those regard. And so I do believe that it is definitely a vehicle that could be standalone, but also sit with its own. But people have to, like I said, want to pay attention.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I really wanted you to highlight its importance. I do agree with you. And I think you said more than 50%. I would agree. The game is fun and all. I mean, again, if we're talking about a game where music plays an important role, the wrong music would change everything. And just to bring an example that probably a lot of people would know, if we take The Last of Us, right? Gustavo Santaolalla's main theme. I mean, that's iconic. A lot of people know it. A lot of people heard it, and it is the theme for the game. And
right,
if you substitute the theme with anything else, even if it's somewhat close to what Gustavo wrote, it's just not the real deal. It's not the real deal. And I really believe that it's 50% of what makes the game so good. And thank you for highlighting that. I actually was at Gustavo's concert not too long ago. He was performing and showcasing his career, basically celebrating, I think, 25 years of his career. And I went alone, and I think it was perfect that I went alone. And telling you, the concert probably lasted a little over an hour, I think. And it felt like a minute for me. It felt like a minute. I sat there, I listened to the whole presentation. There was no light show. There was nothing fancy, nothing crazy. Just Gustavo and a few of his band members playing the tunes. And then him, obviously, at the end, playing The Last of Us theme and other songs also from The Last of Us. Completely transported me to another dimension when it was live. Completely. And it felt like a minute. I left unsatisfied because I wanted more. That's how.
You wanted more.
I wanted more. So yeah, that's how important music is. And I agree with you, definitely. So that's a good point for, good point for real humans versus AI, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. There's.
Go for it.
I was going to say, with the whole AI talk, what I'm excited for is as I move more into doing live performances to hopefully make experiences like you had with Gustavo's music, is that thankfully cannot be replicated.
Oh yeah.
You had that feeling, you had that in-person sonic energy between body and sound coming to you, releasing from you, being received, being with others. There's no replacement for that.
100%. Even the small, I wouldn't say mistakes. Obviously, he didn't make mistakes. I don't know how you call, when you change the, I don't know music at all. But when you change the fingers on the guitar and you hear the
slide,
yeah, and you,
I hate that sound.
It's a bit, it depends. But sometimes that adds to the atmosphere, to the humanity of things.
True.
But
True.
yeah.
As I'm learning guitar for fun, I actually have finger covers, and I think I'm one of the few that's probably I'm going to be able to play. Whereas because it actually bothers my ears.
Really?
I know it's part of the nuance. Yeah. So I'm thinking it's not going to be clean, but it's going to change the texture as I play. So I'll probably be one of the few video game composers or people that actually play with that as a nuance, only because I've hated that sound for a long time. I remember the first time I heard the sound, it was a Sade song, and I love Sade. And I remember hearing it, and because it was so prominent, and it was, I think it was because of the song form, and it would happen, and she's like, dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun, dun. And I'm thinking, and I caught that as a child. I'm thinking,
Right.
what the hell is that? Like, it just stood out. So it might have been bad with the mix. Maybe they could have subdued it, because I have sort of heard some, and it's not bad, but I remember that specifically,
Right.
and I'm thinking, no, I can't do that.
It affected you.
It affected me for life.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I guess when you're playing, you never insure it against these sounds. Every once in a while, you're probably gonna, slide the through the notes like that. But
Yeah,
again, it just
you gotta slide.
adds a little bit of humanity to the whole thing. And Gustavo's such a professional that when he makes them, they work well. In the whole composition.
Some are good at it.
Yeah,
Some no.
yeah, exactly. Chase, I want to ask you this, probably a very important question for any game developers, any people who would like to go into game development, who are listening. And that is, what's the best way to approach working with a music composer? For example, for yourself, what's the best way to express your feelings, express your thoughts, and tell you kind of what is desired? Because from what I understand, if you're a developer, right, you're not really a musician. And I'm sure, and I think Hans Zimmer also said it, I'm sure you don't fully know what you want when you're talking to a composer, right? So what would be the best strategy to take when talking to you?
So I actually wrote this guide last year, and it's called A Short Guide to Working with Video Game Composer. And it's just for me. It's because I know other composers will have their own flow.
Right.
But it's 4 steps. It's all you need. Okay.
All right.
It's 4 steps. It's really simple. The first step is that you at least have an audio asset list sheet. And if you don't know what that is, it is a spreadsheet that I create for you, or that you already typically would have, that lists all the tracks that are needed, how long they need to be, the file format, the file name convention, references of tracks that you feel are related to, if it's title screen music, the theme music, the boss level music, the level music, whatever music you need, the references. And then I outline what timestamps you like about it, what you didn't like about it in that. And then if it's being worked on, if it's not, and that's it for the audio asset list sheet.
Okay.
Then the second step is I need to go through to determine like the minutes of music needed, if there are any other things that mostly that the developer is thinking about that I may not know about, in terms of like maybe the game design documents I need to have in the art process. Then we go through the contract phase, which is just outlining terms, whether it's exclusivity, non-exclusivity, and milestones, things that are coming up for the festivals that they might be entering, so that I know what I'm working with or that I can't work with, because I'm not going to crunch because of poor self-management. It's just, I just don't roll like that. 14 years in, we got to respect each other's time.
For sure.
And so, because I'm someone who likes to be on the project, not at the end. It just seems disrespectful, especially for experiences over 50% for the game player. And then the last step is mostly just buttoning up all the things, and sending, if we agree to the deposit amount, what that will be. Everything else is squared away, and we just take care of all the stuff in the back end, and then I get rolling in terms of what I need to take care of and do. 4 steps.
Oh, you got it all figured out. That's very interesting. Well, I mean, after 14 years, you definitely find your way. Let me just, a quick question about, I believe the first and second point, if I may. So when the developer is talking to you, right, and they give you this reference music, it's from a movie, from another game and whatnot. What if you disagree? What if you say, look, I think you're not going the right direction. I'm a musician. Perhaps I might know more. What's the way for you to propose that to developer, or is it probably in your best interest not to go that direction?
It's not typically that I probably wouldn't agree, but I would mostly add to, because they're able to at least give me a reference.
Right.
That's something. It's better to start with something than from nothing. And there's been, okay, yeah, I actually did come into this. There was something I didn't agree with on one of the recent soundtracks.
Perfect.
But I had to clear it. But I had to clear it up verbally, because what was in the audio asset list sheet, I was thrown off by. And I think it was because the word term was epic. And this is actually related to the track. If you listen to the soundtrack of Ground Zero, it's called Over the Earth. And if you notice, that's the only one that doesn't typically fit in terms of the sound palette thing. It now became orchestral for some reason. There's a reason. I didn't choose that.
Oh, I see.
The team developers did. And the word epic came into, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we're about 6 tracks in and I don't got that much left to write. Epic, I'm not super sure that's going to be fitting that well. And so I approached the conversation to say, are you sure this is what you want? Are you sure did you mean that word? And then it was expanded upon to tell me, well, this is the context. They're in space, and I felt that when you're in space, it feels epic to kind of reach this point, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be epic music. Oh, okay. So you're looking for more of this type of thing, but you still want it to be this genre palette,
right?
The orchestral palette. I said, okay. So now it's like I said, I don't disagree. I just add to. And so I knew I had to do orchestral, but I still snuck in some synth elements in there to kind of tie in to the aesthetic of the sonic sound palette that I built 5-6 tracks before, and then making sure that it also fits the dynamic feeling of the game too, because we were still moving in that direction.
I see. Okay, that's awesome to know. I mean, it's great that you can, find a common language with the developer to be able to, as you said, add to whatever it is that they're saying. And again, it's a collaborative experience. And I believe, well, from what I imagine, it should be a very creative experience between the two. But since you're talking about your album for Aground, it's exactly what I wanted to talk about next. You recently released the soundtrack for a game called Aground Zero. Now, I've taken a listen, and I mean, it's so interesting, right? It's like, it's very spacey, atmospheric. It really, gives an exploratory feel to it. Some tracks are very energetic. Some tracks are a bit eerie and whatnot. And it's truly a very interesting, combination of tracks. And, when I was listening to them, it kind of makes you focus on like, I would imagine playing a game while listening to that, and it would make me really focus on something. And I think it's beautifully composed. And two of my favorite tracks, not the one that you mentioned, but Dishonored One and Down the Hole to the Left. I think those are just
to the right.
No, Down the Hole to the. Oh, sorry, Down the Hole to the right. Excuse me, I wrote here to the left. And
you want to go the other way.
I want to go the other way. And I got to say, the titles as well are so cool. I mean, when I was reading the titles, I'm like, Down the Hole to the Right. What is this all about? And it's just a great great project all in all. And I want to talk about that. How were you inspired by to create the sound? What was the brief like for you? And what was it like to work on this latest album of yours?
I wasn't inspired. I struggled with the inspiration, but I pulled through by doing the work. I just had to believe that it would manifest to what it needed to be, and continue to not trust the process, but trust myself. And the brief was based off of the audio asset list sheet that I had per track. I had to reference a lot of my work. So we were thinking like some things like in temp, it's not even other people's references. There was a lot of my references from the previous Aground soundtrack that I had to tie in to not make it retro sounding as the other soundtrack was, but more modern. But I know as a composer, what they teach you in school is that you want to have things that are callbacks, so that if people are listening with intention, and like I said, the purpose I was saying earlier, that they'll be able to find those Easter eggs that I put in there. They'll understand that, oh, that was the instrument he used from this track. Oh, that was the chord progression that he used from this one. Oh, that was the chord section that he used from this piece. Oh, because it's related to this thing in the game. And there's layers on it, just like it's all related to the game. There's layers in the game. There's dynamic things that are happening within the game, from combat to being exploratory to the environment, which is why it brings that feeling of the subway to communications, to them being in space, to everything else that you're doing with purpose and progress, which is what that if you're thinking also about how the music flows in a linear form through the soundtrack, there's always progression. So in the game, those are sections that are dynamically changing that you never typically hear twice. If you and I play the same game at the same time, you're going to have a different music section than I am. It's never going to be in the same spot. It's never going to be in the same spot.
That's incredible.
So thank you. It is that type of focus that I was saying, and I dubbed it in terms of intelligent think music, and in electronic form genres as intelligent dance music. It may make you want to dance, but when you're playing a game, I realize the player's going to be down there for hours. They're going to be playing this game for hours. It is a survival colony sim, and you're crafting and you're surviving and you're building and you're crafting, you're surviving and you're building, and next thing you know, it's 5 hours to 100 hours that you've done. And I couldn't possibly think with myself to see, I'm going to put this whole thing on loop. Yeah, I just couldn't sit and do that.
For sure.
I would think the players already turned most of the music off, and I just didn't want that to happen. So now you can't, because now you're going to be missing cues and things that I've already dynamically aligned to it, not on purpose because of that, but because I'm trying to serve the player. Again, I'm thinking like them playing the game. I wouldn't want to hear this for so long either. So how can I make this more interesting based off of what's happening that you're doing within the game? So when I completed the project, I was elated.
Yeah, well,
because it took so much to put forth in terms of not really knowing how it was going to be received. But like I said, I have to reverse engineer. I have to think at the end of what the player may do, but I'm starting with nothing. Also something, because I'm trying to write better than my previous self.
I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to compose music, the dynamic music, with the intention of what the player is going to do and not really knowing their actions. I want to ask you, while creating this soundtrack, do you have an opportunity to play test at the same time as you're creating, or?
I had to.
Right.
In order to do the dynamic music system, I had to test it so that it was smooth transitions between, especially for the thing that I think I innovated on, which is having the music change based off of an item being changed.
Wow.
Which I haven't seen in the colony sim being done before. The exploratory thing has been done before. The combat has been done before, but the item changing for that hasn't been done before. And with that being integrated, I had to test that. And it has to sound right. Remember, my ear is very, very keen to things. If I'm hearing guitar slides while I'm in 5th grade, I know that when that thing chops and stops, that just, the immersion is gone. I can't sit by my work by that and have that be shipped. That my integrity, my sonic and my brand and my deep integrity for passion for games is not going to go down like that.
Right. No, for sure. That's the most important thing. And I mean, that's just, doubling the workflow, right? I mean, not only do you need to compose, even tripling, so you need to compose it, you need to make it dynamic, and you need to
design it, compose it, then write it and play it. Yeah, compose it, then mix it, then play test it.
That's a really a lot of work. And again, if we're to put this in contrast to a film, the composer in a movie can look at exactly right what's going to happen from point A to point B, and he will or she will 100% know, where the cues are and what the person's looking at, and it just makes the job, well, I don't know, probably not easier, but let's say a bit lighter,
Not
right?
as complex.
Yeah, not as complex.
Not as complex.
Yeah, not as complex.
They have a locked picture and they're on their way.
That is, for me at least, unfathomable how you do. In terms of time, how long did it take you to create from the day that you started to the day that you were elated? What's the time period?
3 years.
What?
3.
Oh my god! So you were
Yeah, it was a
working
long
on
3
this.
years.
Oh my goodness! 3 years.
I really,
wow.
I could have finished it sooner, but again, without the proper inspiration that I was searching for and I was looking for, I had to stretch the work. So it took 3 years to make the game, so I mostly kind of took the time of the development cycle. But if I was to be honest with you, if I had that same, if everything went right, if I had the same inspiration from the Aground community, if there was still extra push for things that was going on in my life, in the positive light for things, and things were in a more balanced form, I would have finished the soundtrack in a month.
Wow. Okay. Got it. Boy, that's interesting. So you're saying, was the development process a difficult one for the developers, right? It was a bit of up and down, or
not for the. I'm part of the development team, but I can only just speak for me. So it was difficult for me.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Understood. Well, at least it's out, and we can
Yes.
listen to it. Yeah. Where can people find this album and find your work if they want to listen to it or purchase it or download it?
Yes, definitely. I'm pushing more of the purchasing aspect because streams do not pay.
Right.
I'm having a big out with Spotify right now, so my music will no longer be on that
Oh,
platform.
wow. Okay.
But they can purchase it on chasebethea.bandcamp.com.
Got it.
And you can also, I'm trying this new platform, and probably one of the first video game composers on this platform, I think. It's called Even, just EVEN, and they can buy it there. You also buy it off of Apple Music and Amazon as well, and you can stream it there. And it's also on Tidal and other streaming platforms besides Spotify.
Besides Spotify, right? Awesome. Well, we'll have all those linked 100% down in the description for anybody who wants to check out on the music platform of their choice, except for Spotify. But awesome. I'm so happy that it worked out for you at the end. And again, the soundtrack is very, very interesting. Quick question about the sound signature. Again, I'm not a musician. I don't know kind of what sound signature really is, but when I'm listening to these tracks, I'm sometimes you can bob your head to the beat, and here I'm listening and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm not sure. I feel a bit lost at times, and it's just this really exhilarating feeling, to be honest with you. So what is the time signature there, and how do you work in this? If I'm correct in saying time signature, there you go.
No, you are. I'm smiling because it means I'm doing something right. I finally
Right.
This is what I was saying. Like, if you're listening with intent, if you're listening or even with purpose, you're going to catch these things that I'm
Right.
putting there.
Right.
Let's go with alchemization of energy. This is a time signature that when I hear something in my mind, when I need to get it done, I'm just doing it. I'm
Right.
not really thinking about too much of the references anymore. I know what I need to kind of do there in order to find. It was my track to begin with, so I had to figure out, wait, so how do I write better than I did then, and what do I use and what do I don't use and what do I like? And sometimes I don't want to do that. That's what I was saying. Like, some of the inspiration, I had to be inspired from myself, which most people probably would be like, oh my God, that's great. It's harder than you think. So
Wow.
with the time signature with alchemization of energy, I'm probably going to forget this and it's going to suck. But actually, no, I'm going to take the time and look this thing up. I think I have it on my spreadsheet,
sure.
so I hope you don't mind.
No
Because
problem.
I do write these things down, but I want to share this with you because it was very interesting, unless it's in my journal. So I'm going to take the time for this.
For sure.
'Cause
I've
I'm
got
very
all the time in the world. No
excited
problem.
that you asked. Yes,
I had to ask.
did not write it. So I think it's in the journal entry. There it is. Okay.
All right, let's go.
Okay, before I tell you, and I did this, no one's ever guessed the time signature on one Aground soundtrack and it's to this day no one has got it. So I want to just, and it's not the same time signature as this one, but this one, take a guess of what you think it is.
Okay, so if my knowledge is correct, time signature is either the 2/4, right? 4/4. Is that what we're talking about?
That would be a time signature, but
Yeah.
really it's just the definition of that is what the amount of notes that fit within a measure and what actual note duration gets the beat.
Got it. So to a non-musician, how would I guess the time signature correctly? What are the
What does it feel like to you? You could say 4/4, you could say 3/4, 2/4,
all right, let me listen
whatever.
to it again. Let me listen to it again.
Okay.
I have it
Okay.
open right here. So the track is okay. There we go. I'm exactly on the page. So which one is it? You said one
Alchemization of energy.
alchemization. There we go. Okay, 4 minutes 21 seconds. All right, let me just take a listen here.
You don't have to listen to 4.
No, not just a little bit. That's completely different there. Man, I mean, at the beginning, I'm just gonna go for a guess. At the beginning, it sounded like 4/4 for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle, I don't know what it is. I can't even potentially assume. I'm gonna embarrass myself if I try. That's my guess.
Okay.
I'm wrong, right?
You are, but that's okay because it was intended to feel like 4/4.
Yeah, okay.
But it's 9/8.
It's 9/8. Whoa. I mean, okay, I'm not, as musically literate as you are, but I don't see a 9/8 there. That is incredible.
Thank you.
Wow. And that's why it's so, again, it's quite, if you're listening to it with intent, like you said, you do get a bit thrown off and you start to think about, well, what is going on here? And I think that's such an interesting, Easter egg, as you would say, for the tracks that you're making.
Thank you. It wasn't intentional to write it that way. It was like I said, come this idea from my mind. I feel this groove. I feel this melody, this counter melody, this chord progression, and this is how it comes into, and I like it. And I'm thinking, okay, I haven't done that before. It's uncomfortable, but I think I can make it work as long as I know I could go way off the rails with some of the time signatures, and trust me, I have. And I think the reality,
I would imagine, yeah.
The reality soundtrack I've done, but I noticed, like I said, some people they're so accustomed to the typical type of game music that they hear. When I come into the fold, they're thinking like, whoa, what are you doing? This is not game music, really. I mean, it is, but it isn't. We're going to go back to the other stuff. So I have to massage the way to make it feel like it's something that you're familiar with when really it's not. And I'm doing something different all together. So it kind of works. It works in that regard. And when I was researching, when I got stuck, I actually did get stuck in certain parts because it wasn't working the way that it should. When it was getting a little odd. Because remember, I have to piece this out in dynamic form, and it has to smoothly transition too.
It's a nightmare, I can imagine.
So when I researched it, there was some very few pieces that was written in 9/8, and it was the Fantasia theme and Claire de Lune and a couple Bach pieces as well. But there's not a lot.
Wow, that's incredible.
So thinking, of course, I would choose the time signature from my mind to write on these very iconic pieces. This was, like I said, it wasn't on purpose. It just happened.
Right.
But yeah, that's 9/8. An electronic genre at that.
That's incredible. No, really incredible. And again, for a non-musician like me to notice this, I think that's, you've achieved what you wanted to achieve. And this is not me, telling it to you because we're having a conversation. I think this is genuinely the truth because, I mean, I'm not at all well-versed in music or anything like that. And if I feel a certain, curiosity in that, I think, that's a really great achievement. And I'm I'm not the only one who is, curious that way. So that's a job well done. A very
Thank you.
unique piece of music
you.
there. And again, if anybody's
Thank you.
listening, I encourage them to definitely, take a look at the music, your music. I think, it's very interesting and will definitely be a great addition to anybody's playlist. That's for sure. I'd like to move on. You've mentioned when we connected previously that you're also working on writing a book. And from what I gather, the main the main theme of the book is kind of centered around, as you said, mentality and the solutions for working in the video game industry, specifically as a composer for video games. Now, I want to dive a little deeper into, what the book is about and kind of what inspired you to start writing the book and what's it called and when, can we expect to be able to read the book?
The inspiration came from experiences that happened 5 years ago. And there were unfortunate experiences of the movement that happened with the passing of George Floyd. And I had already been writing before that. And I was thinking of how I was going to put a collection of things together because I was having a lot of frustrations with experiences I was having within the field and this is mostly going to tie into what it's about in terms of how I was being treated and the microaggressions and the like that passive aggressive type of things as well. And also just, I know it's, and just how some people just operated with no shame and just was just going about however, but then also on the side of good experiences that I've had from mentors and people that helped me in the micro ways they did for small periods of time, even though I would have wanted more from those things. I'm grateful for this, be able to have those moments and experiences with those people that kept me going in a way. And so I realized that I have to create this because it's not being talked about. I have read almost all the game music books that have been published since I've been in the industry. So not just the complete guide to game audio, but I've read most of the other ones too. And I didn't really see it. It's on the surface of how it's talked, but it's not in the breadth of how it's talking about the pragmatism of really the experiences and the anecdotes and mentalities. So as I grew and I got to a point of it, I was thinking there needs to be to show what it's like to navigate mentally continuously the people, why they're in and they're out, or they're burnt out, they're spent, and also the good side, because most of the books are focused on like the glamour of and the glorification of game celebration, and that's cool, but it wasn't real. It wasn't what I was hearing from colleagues and my mentors and other people in the field and different stories. I'm thinking, well, why are we barely talking about this? What is the taboo problem? And then I thought, as I looked around, I was thinking, there's not that many of me either.
Right.
And there's not that many of me that think of how I think. So I was thinking, I'm just going to put it together. And as I was writing more, I was finding I'm a solutionist. I like to at least solve problems if I can.
Right.
And I realized, this isn't really the issue. This is the issue. So I talk about what mature networking is, why it's not the same as what you think about with your ideology and your affinity with games. You can't bring into your child way of making friends. It's not the same at a mature level.
That's so
you need to understand where the levels are typically, and then maneuver accordingly for it to be successful. I also don't believe in an imposter syndrome. I believe it's a very cliche term, and it's not to discredit or disrespect anyone that typically embodied what they thought that is,
Yeah.
but I'm really going to break down what it really is for them, and hopefully they can just narrow that and work forward from there, because I don't think that's a very good terminology. And if the field has a bad habit of picking up cliches and then everybody just wants to say it because that's what everyone has said, but not the words really matter. And the part of writing the book is accentuating my wordsmith skills that hopefully will unlock worlds. I believe that words unlock worlds, and if it's phrased in the right way, it can help people grow in a good way and overcome other things that they probably have been blocked by in other forums. And so the title of the book is Student of the Game: How I've Navigated the Video Game Industry the Past Decade. And it will be released November sometime of this year.
Well, I'm definitely very interested to read it because, as you mentioned, the topics, they're not necessarily really closely related to music or for musicians. I think even if you're not a musician, there's a few bits and pieces of information there that will be very interesting to read. Now, you mentioned something that I found so interesting, and it really caught my attention, which is mature networking. Now, I want to dive into that a little bit, if I may, if you're okay with kind of talking a little bit about it without exposing too much. And especially, if we could talk about it in contrast to the more, transactional or superficial connections that we often see in not only in the industry, but in networking events or in just normal events. And I've spoken about networking with a few of my guests, and it's such a superficial thing sometimes for me, where people just talk for the sake of talking. Nothing really comes out of these conversations. People divert you to another person within 5 minutes of a conversation. They pretend like they're interested, and when you try to follow up, there's either you get ghosted, or perhaps there's many other stories. I'm sure all of us have experienced something remotely close to what I'm talking about. And so when you mention mature networking, I find that a very crucial point. And if you may just explain what that is in your experience and what are you trying to convey with that message?
Absolutely. And you pretty much are talking exactly what it's about,
right?
In terms of no one's really saying anything. There's the real connections. You're getting diverted for something after less than 5 minutes or things like that. And now there are obviously variables with certain things. Some people have these personalities, whereas they are introverts and they don't have those social skills to kind of be there. They know they need to be there, but they're not possible. But it's about the second thing you mentioned. Like, even if it's not in the moment of something there, the follow-up is the problem.
Right.
That's the problem. Because in the mature networking thing, I think the social skills is that the people have this fear of rejection, but the rejection is what will help the growth to mitigate and navigate ourselves to the right people we need to be connected to. So if it's, and here's a very tiny example. We're having a conversation and someone else comes in the fold, and then they're having a conversation with that person and they want to connect with me. And it's in my responsibility to be honest if I wish to be, hey, do you want to connect? To say no,
right,
or to say yes. And if I say yes, be honorable to then know if they follow up with me that I at least reply.
Right.
Or to be honest about how I actually feel.
Yeah.
From not be a jerk, not be mean, but what I talk about in the book is I give different, remember, solutionists, I give different sentence phrases to say what you feel like, and it's a rejection, if a small rejection of that kind,
right?
Because if you're not feeling it with that person, if you really don't want to help that person, if you want this, there are ways to say things, whereas then you're not destroying their world. And I feel like they will respect you more, and you probably won't make enemies, because it's not just with a musician like me. I've heard it even at top levels of producers that they don't hear it from other people. Yeah, that's what kind of gave me peace, is that, I'm not
the only one.
I don't want to be I don't want to be disingenuous about it, but it was like I was really it was a volcano kind of building within me
Yeah.
about it, because I was thinking like, what do you mean? But as you're saying, like when you're outside of your mind, you hear someone else is experiencing the same thing you are. That's what I mean by the piece that I was saying.
Yeah.
It's mostly like, oh, I'm not the only one suffering through these people who are not just spending 2 minutes to say yay or nay, or
Yeah.
good to see you, or acknowledge the email, get back to you later.
Yeah.
Things like that. And that is the maturity part of it. Some people just think that they have this fear in their mentality, whereas they weren't taught and they don't know, and they haven't gone through the social skills or the skills of being like, I worked in retail for over 10 years. So I had to not only know how to speak to people, but also
Yeah.
how to experience different personalities
Oh, yeah.
that came at me.
I can imagine.
And not everybody gets that experience. Some people just hop into one small nook thing into another, and then they decide to make a game, and that's it. And they skip all these other things, and that's jumping levels, as I talk about in the book, right?
Interesting.
You put in the cheat code, and you got past this, but now you didn't know what that was to get through this one thing, and so no, yeah, and it's no fault to them. It's just that, but you need to kind of go back and learn those skills,
Right.
and so the maturity part of it, like I was saying, is that you need to kind of build those up so that one, it's going to flow a little bit better, and other people won't feel, like you said, so lost, because a lot of things get dropped. Like, and another variable is some people miss the email. Some people, things just bad timing. It happens, but I have examples where I said, hey, if I'm reaching out to you for over a year, how
Yeah.
much bad timing do I have?
Oh man, I can relate to that.
And I'm meeting you on
Right.
different platforms where I'm reaching you now, and at some point, I'm just gonna feel ignored, and that's not
Yeah.
gonna feel good. Versus where you just take the time after maybe the third one and say, hey, thanks for reaching out, really appreciate it. Fortunately, I'm not really interested, but
Yeah.
please, take care and be on, and then you two are on your way, and
Yeah.
that's it, and that's all you have to
Yeah.
say. But for some reason, that other mentality is still preserved, where they are just scared of like, oh, if I reject them, then they're gonna hate me, or they're gonna want to come after me, and that's not always the case. And I mean, when I say not always, I mean probably a high percentage. I don't want to put a number
Yeah.
on it, but I don't think the majority of people are gonna think and respond that way. Sure, some
I don't
people
think
may
so, for
jump
sure,
off
yeah.
the roof, but that also is something you can't control. And hopefully it doesn't escalate to someone, getting to these very out of pocket experiences. But and this is all levels of discipline in the field, because I've experienced it from journalists to producers to other composers that want to collaborate to podcast people that I'm supposed to be on. Everybody's doing it. And so it just shows me the mentality of, like
Yeah.
you said, like, yeah, no, it's not just for, this book is not just for composers thing. This is for everyone. That's why I said how I navigated the video game industry, not how I navigated game audio,
You're right.
because it's the entire industry of everything that I've felt from the years, in terms of what I've experienced in a room, whereas no one's looking in your eye, or they're telling me like, yeah, follow up me. And I know they got the email because they kind of slip up and say something from someone else and whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, so what are we doing?
Yeah. Oh man.
Why aren't we doing better? And why? I'm thinking of it, and I'm thinking outside of myself, and I'm being graceful, like I said, with all those variables, but it's still not, it's not my job to teach them etiquette, but I'm also not, I'm not deserving of that. And we could just do better by just having a couple minutes of word structure thing. And if you don't know, just ask for help how to do it. And then we could be a lot further. And we wonder why the mentality of the industry is the field that this state has been in for so long. And that's why I wrote this book, is to kind of help thinking like, hey, look, if no one ever told you, I thought of it for you at least. And you don't have to agree, but at least you can at least think about it a little bit, as intelligent as y'all are to ship games, to think about this aspect so that we can become better in the field for the
Right.
future.
That's very interesting points. I can definitely relate to the follow-ups and networking and whatnot. Now, I just want to add a little bit, if I may. I think not the worst part, but perhaps the wrong thing to do, which happens, like 9 times out of 10, is when you connect with somebody, communicate with them, let's say at an event or whatever, and they seem very open towards whatever it is you're talking about. And it's their proposition to send you an email or to, reach out, in a couple of days. And then when you do, they ignore you. I think that's wrong. Or, I think you should be, if you're asking somebody to reach out to you and you're providing your card or whatever, you shouldn't think that person is reaching out to you because they are, I don't know, trying to get something out of you. You're at a networking event. That's what you're doing, right? You're at an event. It's okay to speak to people. And if someone writes to you after you've asked them to do so, I think that's, it's a great thing the person has remembered. And like you said, it's the easiest thing in the world to do, to give them closure. Just to say, hey, you know what? This and this popped up. Terribly sorry. Blah, blah, blah. That's it. Job. But then you got to follow up, this, that. And then you're thinking, but did they receive the email? And then you're thinking, am I being too, am I bugging them too much? Is this the right thing? And then, it just goes nowhere. So you're right. Just to be able to kind of establish a yay or nay, as you say, at the beginning of a conversation would be such a beneficial thing. And, quite frankly, I have reached out to quite, very high value potential guests for the podcast. And high value, I mean like very, very, famous and, well-respected people who really don't need to answer my emails, cold emails. And even they have answered and they have respectfully declined. And that's perfectly fine. And I feel satisfied. I feel like, well, you know what? I got an answer from this, so-and-so. And you're thanking them for their answer. They don't have time or they don't want to. It's their decision. But I feel so satisfied that I received an answer and it's a no, whatever. But it's just this closure that is so very important. And I really wish that, people understand that. And your book, that's coming out, I'm definitely going to take a look at that. I would really be interested to read about your intricacies in this field. That's really cool.
Thank you for sharing those experiences in terms of, especially like you're saying, the higher ups that have taken the time to respond. And that shows mature accountability and mentality there. They didn't have to, but they understood. And I think what the thing is, nobody really gets it until it happens to them more than once. It's not going to take one time.
Right.
More than once. And they're like, oh, that's what it feels like. But we shouldn't be getting back in of like, oh, you didn't like it when I did it to you type of feeling. It shouldn't be that. It should have been learned. And I have this theory, like I said, I've been in the field. I've watched a lot of people and I've seen how I've watched networking things where I haven't talked and I've just speculated because some people just didn't even want to talk to me. And so it just forced me to kind of like, I'm not ready to leave. So I'll just, watch how things go. But I can see the body language, I can see the maturity thing. I can hear the conversations that are going on, in that regard and how it's being spoken to and seeing how others are being treated too. And I'm thinking, wow, okay. Now I get it. It makes sense. Because if you go to so many, but yeah, unfortunately, until people have those experiences, then they don't know what it feels like. And then they hopefully may adapt. I can't say that they do because I don't know.
We never know.
I hope that they adapt for the better and then realize like, yeah, I can at least say in the moment, and that takes a lot to do in the moment. That's I think a higher mature skill to kind of do. But if it's something that asynchronous, like you said, the email or a message, do you have time to kind of at least think, but then get back with them in terms of at least a week or two, whatever is good within the bandwidth.
Yeah, definitely. Really interested to check out your book whenever it comes out in November. And whenever it comes out, I'll link it obviously in the description for anybody else to take a look. But, Chase, it was such a pleasure to talk to you. Such a pleasure, to connect with you, to share your thoughts. I think, there's many other avenues that definitely could be explored, but those would have to be separate podcasts. I believe there's so much to talk about. You're such an interesting, creative person. I've learned a lot through our conversation here. And thank you for sharing your insights, for your thoughts. And it was just a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Gotcha. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful conversation. I hope to be back again.
Definitely. Thank you.